Word on the street is that Sinaloa's top bosses are allegedly snitching to the US Gov. Why? El Chapo is stuck in Supermax for life, and if there's a shot at a plea deal, they're taking it. Then there's El Mayo, whose arrest was obviously an inside job, meaning the cartel's cracking from within. With Trump's recent moves regarding border insecurity, they seem more like targeted actions taken based on intel. If the very revered Sinaloa's feeding intel, they're either weakening rivals, dodging extradition, or buying time. Either way, the empire is shaking. El Chapo warns Trump. In a wild twist, Mexican security forces have nabbed a man known as El Jando, a pilot suspected of working for the infamous Los Chapitos cartel. The arrest went down in Culiacan, deep in cartel territory. Authorities believe El Jando was a key player in Los Chapitos, the faction run by the sons of legendary drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. But taking him down wasn't easy. During the raid, one soldier tragically lost his life, a grim reminder of just how dangerous it is to go up against these powerful criminal empires. Even so, officials are calling it a major win, especially with the growing pressure to rein in cartel activity in Mexico. And he wasn't just a pilot. Prosecutors claim he was knee-deep in drug and arms trafficking, allegedly behind several deadly attacks on security forces. If true, that makes him a major piece in the cartel's ruthless operation. According to intelligence sources, El Jando might have played a crucial role in a sting operation that led to the capture of another major drug lord, El Mayo Zambada, in the U.S. Details about the operation remain murky, but with El Jando now in custody, authorities are hoping to dig deeper into Los Chapitos' global network. But here's where it gets even messier. Word on the street is that El Mayo was betrayed by none other than Joaquin Guzman Lopez, one of El Chapo's own sons. U.S. officials say Guzman Lopez tricked the 75-year-old cartel veteran into boarding a plane that secretly crossed into U.S. territory. That betrayal has reportedly fractured the cartel, sparking violent clashes between factions loyal to El Mayo and those backing Guzman Lopez. As a co-founder of the notorious Sinaloa cartel, alongside the infamous Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, El Mayo has been a major player in the drug trade since the late 80s. But while El Chapo got caught and escaped twice, El Mayo stayed one step ahead for over 35 years. That is, until now. His reign came to a shocking end when U.S. authorities arrested him in El Paso, Texas, in a dramatic takedown that no one saw coming. And make no mistake, this wasn't luck. It was a calculated betrayal, allegedly orchestrated by none other than Joaquin Guzman Lopez, El Chapo's own son. Guzman Lopez, a rising force in the cartel, set the trap by convincing El Mayo they were scouting locations for secret airstrips in northern Mexico. But instead of finding new smuggling routes, El Mayo walked straight into the hands of U.S. agents. For years, El Mayo had spoken about his fear of being captured. He once admitted that the thought of prison filled him with panic, even questioning whether he'd have the guts to take his own life if cornered. But when the moment finally came, the 76-year-old drug lord didn't make a move. His decades-long run was over. These arrests have raised an important question. Are El Chapo and the Los Chapitos offering up information to the U.S. to help disrupt cartel operations from within, all in exchange for reduced sentences? Following all of these new developments, the U.S.-Mexico border has become a battleground under the Trump administration's aggressive immigration policies. With a hardline crackdown on illegal crossings, security has tightened, hitting cartels where it hurts, their wallets. Billions of dollars in human trafficking profits are drying up, and now these criminal organizations are lashing out. No longer satisfied with traditional smuggling tactics, Mexican drug cartels are now deploying kamikaze drones and explosives, an unprecedented escalation that turns the southern border into a battlefield. A leaked memo from the El Paso Sector Intelligence and Operations Center, issued on February 1, 2025, warns Border Patrol agents and U.S. military personnel to remain on high alert. Cartel leaders have authorized drone strikes, a chilling move that signals a shift toward military-style warfare. These unmanned aerial weapons, similar to those used in Ukraine and the Middle East, could soon be raining down on U.S. personnel, changing the game entirely. For years, drug cartels have used drones for smuggling narcotics and tracking law enforcement movements. But now, they're taking it a step further, weaponizing them with explosives. The goal? Strike fear into U.S. forces and force them to pull back, keeping smuggling routes open. U.S. intelligence sources report that cartels are testing drone-mounted explosives in remote areas of Mexico, perfecting their tactics before launching full-scale attacks. One high-ranking border official described the shift as a nightmare scenario. These cartels now have air power. The timing of this escalation is no coincidence. President Donald Trump, back in office since January, has wasted no time reinforcing the southern border. Within days of taking power, he deployed 10,000 U.S. troops and launched a nationwide crackdown on undocumented criminals, with border czar Tom Homan leading the charge. Cartel bosses, feeling the heat, are fighting back with everything they've got. Social media platforms like TikTok and Telegram are now flooded with disturbing content, encouraging migrants to resist U.S. law enforcement. Some posts instruct migrants to spit in ICE agents' food, defecate in their vehicles, and even assassinate officers, a level of hostility that's sending shockwaves through federal agencies. In response, U.S. Border Patrol agents have been ordered to remain fully armed and ready for combat. A new mandate requires agents to carry first aid kits and tourniquets for battlefield-style injuries, body armor capable of withstanding shrapnel and gunfire, and rifles, now to be kept within reach at all times. The message is clear: prepare for war. One of the most dangerous flashpoints is Tamaulipas, a northeastern Mexican state notorious for cartel violence. The U.S. State Department has slapped it with a Level 4 travel advisory, the highest possible warning, urging Americans to stay away due to extreme crime and kidnapping risks. And the threats aren't just from guns and gang wars. Cartels are now using improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, planting them on dirt roads to control territory and retaliate against rivals and law enforcement. Michael Brown, a former DEA senior special agent and now a global counter-narcotics expert, warns that cartels had nearly unrestricted access to the U.S. border under previous policies. But with the sudden shift, they're fighting back. The result may be a violent escalation that's looking more and more like a war zone. IEDs have been found in key cartel strongholds like Reynosa, Rio Bravo, Valle Hermoso, and San Fernando. One incident reported by the U.S. consulate in Mexico saw a Mexican government vehicle blown up in Rio Bravo, proof that these devices aren't just scare tactics, they're deadly. U.S. government employees are now banned from traveling between cities and Tamaulipas at night and are advised to avoid dirt roads altogether. Even using interior Mexican highways in the state is restricted, underscoring just how dangerous the situation has become. For Americans living or working near the border, the stakes have never been higher. With cartel revenues tanking, violence is surging, increasing the chances of armed confrontations with U.S. law enforcement and military personnel. To counter this, the Trump administration has deployed 1,500 active-duty troops to the southern border, boosting security to keep the chaos from spilling over. Mexico's failed crackdown on the cartel. The Mexican drug war has been an all-out battlefield, with powerhouses like the Sinaloa Cartel and Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJN, running the show. These groups aren't just drug traffickers, they're multinational crime empires with deep pockets, brutal enforcement tactics, and operations stretching across continents. The Sinaloa Cartel, once led by the infamous Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, still holds a massive grip on the drug trade, controlling nearly half of Mexico's states and pushing its influence into at least 47 countries. But drugs aren't their only game. They dabble in extortion, migrant smuggling, and even weapons trafficking, proving that their business model is built on chaos and control. CJN, on the other hand, started as a Sinaloa offshoot, but has skyrocketed to the top since 2010. These guys aren't just making moves, they're rewriting the cartel playbook. With a presence in over 36 countries in all 50 U.S. states, they've turned fentanyl, cocaine, and meth production into a billion-dollar empire. Controlling key Mexican ports gives them direct access to global supply chains, making them one of the most dangerous and well-connected criminal networks on the planet, and the violence off the charts. Since Mexico's government declared war on the cartels in 2006, more than 431,000 people have been killed. Politicians, journalists, students, and everyday citizens caught in the crossfire. The cartel's bottomless war chests let them buy off officials at every level, ensuring their operations keep running no matter how much law enforcement tries to crack down. The human toll of this war is staggering. Widespread torture, extrajudicial killings, and disappearances aren't just cartel tactics. Government forces have also been accused of carrying out atrocities. Since 2006, nearly 90,000 people have vanished, with local search efforts often blocked by corruption, incompetence, or sheer violence. One of the darkest examples of this chaos was the 2014 disappearance of 43 students in Guerrero, a case that exposed just how deeply organized crime and government corruption are intertwined. end. The U.S. has poured billions into Mexico's fight against the cartels, funding security upgrades, judicial reforms, and even development projects aimed at curbing migration. But tensions between the two countries grew, especially under the former Mexican president Andrés Manuel López Obrador, AMLO. His hugs, not bullets approach, focused on job creation and social programs rather than military crackdowns, was hit with heavy criticism. AMLO has pushed for cartel amnesty, decriminalization of all drugs, and an anti-corruption drive, but the violence hasn't let up. In reality, his strategy still relies on heavy militarization, much like his predecessors, and many argue it hasn't moved the needle in Mexico's war on crime. Meanwhile, across the border, the U.S. is grappling with its own crisis: fentanyl. This synthetic opioid, up to 50 times stronger than heroin, has fueled a deadly epidemic, and Mexican cartels are flooding the market with it. Between 2019 and 2020 alone, Mexican authorities seized 5 times more fentanyl, but the supply pipeline keeps flowing. U.S. officials have ramped up border security and monitoring, but the cartels are always one step ahead, smuggling drugs through underground tunnels, inside vehicles, and even flying them over the border with drones.
Here's an example of what we're getting in tires. So they'll get 4 of these together to make a circle, bolt them around the rim of the tire.
Once the drugs hit U.S. soil, local street gangs take over distribution, keeping the crisis alive.
This port of entry sees more fentanyl than any other port of entry in the U.S. In fact, over half of it is interdicted here. And the problem just keeps growing and growing and growing. In the first 6 months of 2023, officers have seized more fentanyl than they had in the last 5 years combined.
The relentless adaptability of the cartels ensures that even as authorities crack down on one smuggling method, another more advanced technique emerges. Tunnels, while still an integral part of cartel logistics, are just one facet of their ever-expanding playbook. Cartels are increasingly diversifying their trafficking strategies, utilizing drones, semi-submersibles, and even commercial supply chains to move narcotics undetected. Drones, once the domain of hobbyists and tech enthusiasts, have become a powerful tool in the cartel's arsenal. These unmanned aerial vehicles can carry significant payloads of drugs across the border in minutes, bypassing traditional checkpoints and making it nearly impossible for law enforcement to intercept every shipment. The rapid evolution of drone technology means cartels can now operate fleets remotely, adjusting flight paths in real time to avoid detection. Some drones are even programmed with autonomous flight paths, reducing the risk of operators being tracked. In addition to high-tech methods, cartels have turned to the seas, deploying semi-submersibles, low-profile vessels designed to skim just above the waterline and evade radar detection. These so-called narco-submarines have been spotted in increasing numbers along both the Pacific and Gulf of Mexico coasts, each capable of carrying thousands of pounds of drugs. Constructed in remote jungle shipyards, these vessels are a testament to the cartel's vast resources and engineering capabilities. While the U.S. Coast Guard and Mexican Navy have intercepted a number of these submarines, intelligence reports suggest that many more slipped through undetected, ensuring a steady flow of narcotics into North America. Even the most legitimate supply chains are not immune to cartel infiltration. Commercial trucking, long-haul freight, and even shipping containers are routinely exploited to smuggle drugs across borders. Cartels bribe port officials, truck drivers, and warehouse operators to facilitate shipments, embedding narcotics within everyday goods like produce, electronics, and textiles. Authorities have uncovered shipments of cocaine hidden in bananas, fentanyl-laced pills mixed in with prescription medications, and methamphetamine disguised as industrial chemicals. The sheer volume of global trade makes it nearly impossible to screen every shipment thoroughly, creating ample opportunities for cartels to exploit gaps in security. Take, for example, El Chapo. Before he was arrested, he had perfected smuggling drugs through underground tunnels. One of the most significant discoveries came in 2020, when U.S. authorities uncovered a massive, highly sophisticated tunnel running from Tijuana, Mexico, to a warehouse in San Diego, California. The tunnel stretched over 4,300 feet, nearly 3/4 of a mile, and was outfitted with ventilation, reinforced walls, and an underground rail system. Investigators described it as one of the most advanced tunnels ever found, proving that the cartel's engineers had only grown more skilled since El Chapo's reign. Beyond the physical tunnels, the Sinaloa cartel and rival organizations like the Jalisco New Generation cartel have adopted high-tech methods to counter U.S. border security measures. Thermal imaging imaging, underground sensors, and seismic detectors have made tunnel detection more effective. Yet cartels have adapted by developing better concealment techniques, such as constructing multi-level tunnels or using sophisticated soundproofing materials to avoid detection. Additionally, with border security tightening, cartels have expanded their operations into maritime smuggling, using everything from fishing boats to fully submersible narco subs. The introduction of fentanyl into the market has also changed cartel logistics, as smaller, high-potency shipments can now generate as much profit as the massive cocaine and marijuana loads of the past. Even with law enforcement agencies dismantling tunnel networks and improving detection technology, the billion-dollar drug trade ensures that cartels will always find new ways to move their product. Whether through underground tunnels, airborne drones, or hidden compartments in commercial shipments, the smuggling empire that El Chapo pioneered remains as innovative and elusive as ever. What remains true is that the Mexican cartels cannot exist without the support of public officials. This isn't just a case of occasional backdoor deals. It's a full-blown system where cartels rely on corrupt officials to keep their operations running smoothly. The idea that these cartels are all powerful, untouchable empires is a myth. In reality, their survival depends on the people in power who look the other way, or worse, help them stay in business. Author Oswaldo Zavala, in Narco-Trafficking in U.S. and Mexican Culture, argues that cartels aren't as independent as they seem. Instead, their success often comes from the silent or not-so-silent support of government insiders. This corruption lets them operate with little resistance, making it harder to crack down on the drug trade in any meaningful way. Take the arrest of two Sinaloa cartel leaders near El Paso. On the surface, it looked like a big win for law enforcement, but in reality, these high-profile arrests barely made a dent. The so-called kingpin strategy, focusing on capturing cartel leaders, doesn't stop the drug flow. If anything, it breaks the market into smaller, more chaotic factions, making drugs even easier and cheaper to get. And the fact that these cartels keep thriving, even after their bosses get locked up, proves one thing. They've got powerful friends in high places, keeping the system intact. The 2019 Culiacan crisis drove this point home. When the Mexican army captured Ovidio Guzman, El Chapo's son, the Sinaloa cartel unleashed chaos, blocking roads, setting fires, and taking hostages until the government caved and let him go. It was a shocking display of cartel influence. But let's be real, they pulled this off because they had help from the inside. This wasn't just brute force, it was power, connections, and corruption working together. Another prime example, the infamous Sinaloa cartel. Its leader, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, dodged capture for years, not just because of his cartel's firepower, but because of the people in power who helped him. Reports show that some U.S. Border Patrol agents and law enforcement officers took bribes to let shipments slip through unchecked. These insiders, drawn in by stacks of cash, made smuggling easier and law enforcement look like a joke. And it's not just low-level border agents. In 2019, former DEA agent Jose Irizarry was convicted of laundering millions in drug money. This wasn't just a case of someone looking the other way. Irizarry actively helped cartels dodge law enforcement, leaking sensitive investigation details so they could stay ahead of the game. His betrayal didn't just hurt the DEA's credibility, it made cartel bosses even bolder, proving that U.S. law enforcement had its weak spots. Corruption isn't just happening at the border, it's spread across major U.S. cities. Take Chicago in 2012, when a local police officer was caught red-handed protecting cartel drug shipments. Instead of fighting crime, he was cashing in on it. And he's not alone. Cases like this keep surfacing, exposing how deeply cartels have infiltrated American institutions. The reason this keeps happening? Money. Lots of it. With billions in drug profits, cartels can afford to buy their way into almost any system. They don't just slip cash into pockets, they launder it through legitimate businesses, making it nearly impossible to trace. This financial muscle lets them manipulate law enforcement, politicians, and other key players, keeping their empire intact. Even the word cartel was a branding move. The DEA popularized it in the late 1970s to sell the idea of these drug organizations as massive criminal empires. But in reality, many cartel operations have been quietly coordinated with help from federal police and even the Mexican military. This isn't a new phenomenon. It's an old game that's been played for decades, with plenty of public officials caught taking bribes to keep the cartel's business booming. As law enforcement agencies intensify their crackdown on these smuggling methods, the cartels continue continue to evolve. They employ counterintelligence tactics, hacking surveillance networks, paying off insiders within border agencies, and even disguising their operatives as law enforcement officers to move freely. The battle between authorities and cartels is a high-stakes chess game, with billions of dollars on the line and countless lives caught in the crossfire. In an effort to intensify the crackdown on border insecurity, the United States has issued a new executive order that has put the cartel operation in jeopardy. The U.S. new executive order. In a move that shook global politics, the Trump administration announced plans to officially designate 8 major drug cartels as terrorist organizations. By slapping the terrorist label on these criminal syndicates, the U.S. signaled a new level of aggression in its fight against cartel violence, setting the stage for drastic legal and military action.
Under the orders I signed today, we will also be designating the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. I will direct our government to use the full and immense power of federal and state law enforcement to eliminate the presence of all foreign gangs and criminal networks.
At the heart of this decision is the escalating power and brutality of these cartels, most of them based in Mexico. No longer just drug traffickers, these organizations have expanded their reach into human trafficking, illegal arms dealing, and large-scale money laundering. Their influence stretches deep into political and economic systems, eroding governments and spreading terror through mass killings, public executions, and corruption. In many regions, they function like shadow governments, operating with impunity. The Trump administration saw the terrorist designation as a way to crack down harder. This classification opens up a whole new arsenal of legal tools, typically reserved for fighting international terrorist groups. Freezing cartel assets? Check. Blocking their members from traveling? Check. Boosting intelligence sharing with global allies? Double check. And if necessary, it even opens the door for direct military action against cartel leaders and infrastructure. But this move wasn't without backlash. Critics warned that slapping the terrorist label on cartels could complicate U.S.-Mexico relations. Mexico, a crucial partner in the drug war, pushed back hard, arguing that this could justify U.S. military intervention on its soil, something its government fiercely opposes. The fear? A designation like this might escalate tensions instead of solving a problem. For U.S. law enforcement, this shift meant major changes. Agencies like the DEA and FBI had to rethink their strategies, now working within counterterrorism frameworks rather than just organized crime. More collaboration with international partners, more resources, and potentially more high-risk operations targeting cartel leaders. But there was also a risk. Push too hard, and the cartels could retaliate with even more violence. President Trump has also authorized the use of some of the country's most advanced spy planes to target Mexican drug cartels. This is a huge leap forward in the fight against these notorious criminal groups. The deployment includes Navy P-8S equipped with cutting-edge radar systems and the legendary U-2 spy plane, which was originally built for high-altitude surveillance during the Cold War. For the first time ever, the U-2 is being used to hunt down drug cartels, and this move has grabbed the attention of military experts and the world. Over the past 2 weeks, these high-tech aircraft have carried out at least 18 missions over the southwestern U.S. and the international airspace near the Baja Peninsula. This increased surveillance is part of a larger strategy to break up Mexico's most dangerous cartels. Between the end of January and early February, President Trump ordered these spy planes to fly missions, as he also sent thousands of extra troops to the border. By labeling the Mexican cartels as foreign terrorists, Trump has made it clear that he's taking a no-holds-barred approach to fighting the drug trade. These spy planes represent a major shift in tactics, since they've mostly been used to monitor Russian activity in Ukraine or track Russian and Chinese submarines. The Navy P-8S, known for their advanced radar capabilities, carried out 11 of these missions, while the U-2 was used for at least one flight on February 3rd. These planes can gather intelligence far beyond the border, giving U.S. authorities key insights into cartel activities deep within Mexico. This intel is crucial for planning operations that disrupt the cartel's supply chains and break down their networks. This spy plane mission is just one part of a bigger crackdown at the border. Along with ending the U.S.'s catch-and-release policy, President Trump has sent thousands of additional troops to patrol the border. He has also pressured Mexico to take action, demanding the country send 10,000 soldiers to patrol the border border by threatening a 25% tariff. On the ground, communities already suffering under cartel rule watched anxiously. For some, this move signaled hope, a sign that the world was finally taking cartel violence seriously. But others feared the fallout. Would increased military action mean more bloodshed? Would innocent civilians get caught in the crossfire? Would destabilized regions spiral even further into chaos? Since Trump took office, border violence has skyrocketed. Border Patrol agents in Texas have been shot at by suspected cartel members from Mexico, highlighting how dangerous things have become. In response, Mexican drug cartels have gone to extreme lengths, including ordering attacks on U.S. border agents with kamikaze drones and explosives, as revealed in a leaked memo obtained by the Post. Cartel gunmen have also recently opened fire on U.S. Border Patrol agents in a desperate attempt to smuggle illegal migrants across the border. This brazen attack took place in the early hours, under the cover of darkness, in a remote area known for its tough terrain and sparse population. The border, already a hotspot for illegal activities, has become even more dangerous, with this incident marking a new level of aggression. In the aftermath, several gunmen were arrested, and a stash of weapons was seized. Many of the migrants, shaken and injured, were taken into custody for processing. While no fatalities occurred, the incident revealed just how dangerous illegal border crossings have become and how far cartels will go to exploit vulnerable people. The Trump administration's decision to label cartels as terrorist groups was nothing short of a seismic shift in drug war policy. It offered new tools to go after these criminal empires, but also raised serious diplomatic, legal, and humanitarian concerns. As the world watched, one question loomed. Would this move bring real change, or would it simply add another layer of chaos to an already complex crisis? The idea of U.S. military action against Mexican drug cartels is not something to take lightly. It comes with a whole host of challenges and possible consequences that go way beyond just fighting on the front lines. Mexican cartels aren't just your average criminal groups. They operate like highly organized paramilitary forces with tons of money, global supply chains, and complex networks reaching deep into the U.S. They're no easy targets, and any attempt to mess with them could lead to serious retaliation. History shows the cartels know how to strike back. When Felipe Calderón, Mexico's president in 2006, declared a war on drugs, the violence skyrocketed. The cartels hit back hard, targeting law enforcement, military personnel, and government officials. It got so bad that police forces quit in fear, and public officials were murdered in broad daylight. The cartels used horrific tactics, including brutal killings and leaving bodies in public to instill terror, showing that their power goes beyond physical force, tapping into psychological warfare. If the U.S. were to intervene militarily, the stakes would skyrocket. The cartels are already deeply embedded in the U.S., so any retaliation could hit home. Their drug networks stretch from cities like Los Angeles and Chicago to smaller towns, giving them the means to strike within the U.S. The cartels are notorious for assassinating officials in Mexico, and there's no reason they wouldn't consider targeting political figures, law enforcement, and military leaders on U.S. soil. With connections to underground Chinese banking and U.S.-based gangs, the cartels have the resources to pull off major operations inside the U.S. The risks of acting unilaterally with military force are huge. The cartels' proven ability to retaliate, combined with their deep roots in the U.S., could escalate things much more than anyone might expect. We could see an increase in violence within the U.S., destabilization along the border, and added pressure on domestic resources. To avoid this, any U.S. military operation needs to be done in close collaboration with the Mexican government, led by President Claudia Sheinbaum, who has shown a strong interest in tackling organized crime head-on. This could include joint task forces, better intelligence sharing, and special training programs to help Mexico improve its ability to fight back. Addressing corruption in Mexico, which has long been a major barrier to breaking up cartel operations, is also key. By strengthening its partnerships, the U.S. can make a bigger impact without making things worse. Back home, the U.S. needs to be ready for retaliation. Better coordination between agencies like the DEA, FBI, and DHS is crucial to protect potential targets and strengthen efforts to track down cartel threats. It's also important to ramp up support for local law enforcement dealing with cartel-affiliated gangs in the U.S. and to protect against cyber attacks that could come from the cartels. Taking military action against Mexican drug cartels is no simple decision, and the risks involved are serious. A thoughtful, well-informed, and strategic approach is critical to avoid making the problem worse while working toward a solution. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.